All right. Again, thanks for everyone for coming. Again, my name is Gary Bell. I'm a data and AI architect for Covenant Technology Partners. Happy to be here presenting again. So today we're going to cover really how to utilize some of the assets that we've built up over time, presumably in Power BI, to power more natural language AI chatbot kind of interfaces, being able to ask questions of your data. That didn't do what I wanted. So quick agenda. Excuse me. First, we're going to start with just kind of the state of play right now in terms of how you interact with these models via Copilot. There are two primary ways to do that. We'll start by kind of showing the end, if you will, kind of what that looks like, how we interact with it, and then we'll circle back around to how we actually prepare these models so that you can get the best results out of these chatbots, or this. I'm going to say chatbots, but it's really chat interface. So it's about prepping your semantic models primarily is what we're going to look at for AI and kind of what the interface looks like there and the various steps involved and some tips and tricks. Then we're going to go in. I want to touch briefly, and we may end up talking about this ahead of time because my guess is that people are going to have questions as we go. But I do have, I want to spend a few minutes just on what the requirements are in order to enable this kind of experience in Fabric and Power BI. So just what you have to make sure is checked off to do that. And as part of that, we'll talk a little bit about some of the licensing and billing. Kind of, I don't want to get too deep into that because no one likes to talk about licensing, at least of all me. But we'll talk about that just a little bit. And then we'll jump over into what's called a Fabric Data Agent. These are new artifacts that you can create in a Fabric workspace that allow you to really take this natural language kind of chatbot interface and customize it to a greater degree and maybe expand its scope or its reach rather beyond just the Power BI environment or the Fabric environment. I'm going to use those two terms very interchangeably today as well. I want this to be very conversational. I've got a handful of slides, but not a ton. I'm going to be flipping back and forth between some slides to kind of just provide some structure for our conversation today, and then over into Power BI and Fabric itself is just kind of show off some of the things we're talking about. So if you have questions, if you see something on the screen, you're not sure what I did or what that is, blurt it out. If someone could do me a favor and kind of monitor questions online. In fact, I'm fine if you have a question online. I think, can they unmute themselves? They can't unmute themselves? No. Okay. Well, then I guess you can't blurt out. But if you have a question, please raise your hand there, and I'll get those addressed as well. I've got a number of people in the room here, and we can kind of just play it by ear. So again, what I've got is a fairly informal set of slides here to just kind of structure the conversation. But I'm really hoping this is a bit back and forth here if we can. Any quick questions before we get going? All right. Having a hard time clearing my throat. All right. So just to kind of lay out the problem statement, I'm not going to switch to presenter mode because I'm going to be switching back and forth so much. So let me see if I can make this as big as I can anyway. So we all have lots of information. I assume, is everyone here using Power BI? Is anyone, okay, yeah, anyone really gotten into Fabric yet with lake houses or warehouses or a little bit okay over there? We'll talk about kind of how both those things interact, but I think it's fair to say that every organization has a lot of data. You probably, if you've been using Power BI for any time, any length of time, or any moderate-sized organization, you probably have a lot of data in Power BI. Power BI has been out and around for 8 or 9 years now, I think, and it's not uncommon for us to walk into clients who have Power BI estates with hundreds of workspaces and many hundreds, if not thousands, of Power BI models. Now, that's a challenge in and of itself, and there's probably a governance question to be addressed there. But there's a lot of data floating around out there. it's becoming harder and harder to find what we're looking for, to kind of surface the right content, and be able to just get questions answered. So it feels at times kind of like a needle in a haystack. Um, keep pressing the wrong button there. So the uh, the the question here is, what if we could just ask the question of the data, right? Everyone's used ChatGPT and Copilot and those interfaces. They have amazing reach across the internet and can answer all kinds of questions. Essentially, we want to be able to expose that kind of an interface to not just the broader internet, but our own corporate data. So that's what we are intending to try to solve, and we're trying to use the data artifacts, the semantic models, et cetera, within our Power BI environment to source those kind of queries within our organization. So, it's the fourth time in a row I've done that. So Copilot hopes to solve that problem or address that question. Now, in a lot of ways, I see this as kind of a natural evolution of kind of this notion of self-service BI or self-service data that we've been talking about within the industry for 20 plus years, as long as I've been doing it. Um, at first it was, let's make easier reporting tools, and you got more and more people kind of, you took it from kind of the developer world and you took it down to more of an analyst who were trained to use something like a Power BI desktop or maybe an Excel or various other self-service tools. This is again kind of what I see as kind of the natural evolution of that, taking it further downstream, enabling really anybody within the organization, anybody that can type a question into a text box, to be able to ask and answer their own questions without having to pull in a developer to figure out, somebody that knows SQL or somebody that knows in Power BI world now, DAX or something of that nature, to be able to get those kind of questions and get those kind of answers out of our information. So that's the holy grail, right? That's what we're trying to get to. So let's talk quickly about the couple of experiences that are out here today in Fabric, in an effort to try to solve some of those problems. So this is what's already now. It's crazy how fast this stuff moves, but this is already what's being called kind of the classic Copilot experience in Power BI, and that's that Copilot pane within a report. You may or may not have noticed that. Let's just jump over here and we'll take a look at one. So if I open up a report, it should be any report in Power BI. The caveat being that that the workspace needs to be in a capacity, in a Fabric capacity, in a Power BI premium capacity. That will be indicated with um, that little diamond icon next to a workspace. Well, again, we'll get into more of the licensing and what that means later. But any report that you open up should have that Copilot button that will appear right there. So if you don't see it, I don't remember if it's grayed out if you're in a non-capacity workspace, or it just doesn't show up there at all. But you get the Copilot interface, and it'll pop up right in your report. Now, and you can see some of the suggestions on what to do. You can ask it to summarize data and answer some questions about it. The context for this interface is the report that you're looking at, or I guess more specifically, the semantic model that underpins or underlies the report that you're looking at. So I've got one pointed to a sample kind of dummy sales data set that we'll play with a bit today. And when I ask it questions, it can answer questions about that report. So, what were the W key on my keyboard does not work very well, so that's why I'm going to struggle here. Were sales in 2015? We've got some older data in here. Now, we could filter it and look for some of these things on our own, but spin that up and it will respond with an answer for us after some time. I don't think I don't think I warmed this data set up, so it may take a second to get going. And you can kind of see, as you can kind of see up there in the interface, you've got a few other options in terms of, and it'll even give you some hints if you ask it, what can you do? There, it just it answered our question and said, the total sales were approximately 4.5 million. Oh, it actually did it per month. So you can get very specific with your questions, but again, the key being that you're focused really on the data set associated here with this specific report. So if we jump back to our so that's the only real limit there, is we're focused on again just a one semantic model. You can see why this might be somewhat limiting. And again, what they've here recently rolled out now is what they're calling the standalone Copilot experience. This is you see it kind of in this little toolbar up here in the. Let's just talk about it here for a second before we jump off. It's really focused more on data discoverability. You have, as I said, you've got a large data state within Power BI. You've got all kinds of workspaces and reports. And unless you've got bookmarks to remember where all those various reports are at, or just happen to know, it can sometimes be challenging to figure out. Somebody showed me a report last week. I don't remember where I found it. I don't remember where it was. I could go and scroll through all of my list of workspaces. If you've got dozens or more, then that can be time consuming. So Copilot can just help you find a report. Show me the sales summary report that I looked at last week. You can query it that way. You can also ask it the same kind of ad hoc queries that we just did within the context of an individual report. Now, oftentimes you'll need to give it a little bit of context because, if we're dealing with something as generic as sales, my guess is you've got dozens of models throughout your organization that probably have some kind of a sales metric in it. So it will do it. It will take its best guess, and then it'll often ask you. And in fact, I'll show you an example here in a moment. It'll often ask you, which model do you want me to use to solve this problem? And it can do some of the quick summaries and some of the things. You can limit this only to the models that are considered prepped for AI, which is something we're going to get into here in a minute, and I'll show you how to flag them in that way. The value of limiting that to the ones that are prepped for AI is, as we're going to talk a lot about today. If the model is not prepped for AI, you're going to get, first of all, you're going to get a warning from Copilot here in a minute. We'll show you what that looks like. That just says, kind of your standard results may vary. This is an AI and et cetera. And again, if you've got a large data state with multiple, maybe even dev, test, prod versions of it, it's gonna find everything. And so you need to be. It can quickly kind of overwhelm this generic Copilot, the standalone Copilot experience, in a way that the results that get produced can maybe not be that useful or meaningful. So limiting this, and that's a setting in the tenant settings that I'll show you here in a bit, may be a good idea once you've done a little work and prep some of these for AI. Yeah.
Even though I might not have access to it, Copilot is going to check for it and let me know that it is in a specific workspace and get it.
I don't think that we will surface reports that you don't have access to. I think it's going to be limited to your context, so it will show you content within the workspaces that you have access to, as well as apps. We should mention apps would play a part of this as well. Of course, you can have access to an app but not have access to its source workspace. But I believe it is focused on workspaces and apps that you have permissions to. So it's a discoverability tool in the sense that it's intended to help you discover content that you already have access to. If you're really looking for like a data dictionary, kind of that's where Microsoft Purview comes into play. That's really kind of a data catalog. So it's not quite intended for that purpose. But I don't know how well those two tools play together yet. Purview and Copilot. I'm sure there's probably some kind of a Copilot experience for Purview. I'm not completely up to date on where they're at there.
Thank
you. Yeah. Question. That's the big difference. Yeah, that's exactly. She asked, in case everyone can't hear the question, the difference between the standalone Copilot and the Copilot experience I showed you within the context of a report. And yes, the difference, the key difference there is the scope of the tool. Now, again, because standalone Copilot has such a wide uh, purview, to use that term generically, in terms of what it can see, you need to be careful where you point it and what kind of results you get at. So let's take a look at what it looks like when we jump over to back into Fabric. So when you log into Fabric, you'll see this Copilot button over on the left-hand side. And again, I'm not sure if you're going to see it or it'll be grayed out if you don't have a capacity. The first time you click on it, I think it's going to ask you what um, what workspace you want to assign to it, and I'm gonna table that one for our conversation about some of the requirements and how the licensing and consumption works. But essentially, it just needs to know that you have a Fabric capacity within your environment that you could use to kind of execute these Copilot queries. So you just get this is kind of the generic Copilot interface, or a standard kind of chat GPT kind of interface where you just get an empty box and you can start typing some questions. It will suggest a handful down here at the bottom if you have questions, but we could ask the same kind of question that we just asked it. In fact, let me ask it the exact same question. What were sales in 2015? And what it's likely going to tell us here, and I say likely because it's always a little different here, right? It's going to say, "Oh, I found lots of things that might help you answer your questions," and some of it say, in fact, this is the Fabric agent that we're gonna work on later. That's interesting that I found that. Um, it's actually not finding. Again, this is a pretty generic query, but it's actually not finding the one that I wanted to use. So let's do one other thing. We can tell it to. I'm just going to copy that same query again. But you can actually give it context on your own if you need to. Again, sometimes it'll prompt you if you give it something a little more specific, maybe than I gave it here. You're likely to get better results out of that initial list of things that might solve your question. But if you already know what model you want to point it to, or what workspace, I guess you need a model you need to point it to. You can come in here and direct it specifically. So you'll see it's broken down. You can see the list of reports or semantic models or data agents that we'll work on. Right now, I wanted to query that wide world importers data set that I have in my demo workspace. So I'm just going to give it that context here and ask it to answer that question for us. And it should be smart enough to answer that question. Oh, it even used it. So we're going to get into I've given it some other instructions I'll show you in a minute, but it's including some of that as well. So it answered that question, gave us a little breakdown. Um, and so you can see that that it helps not only answer the same kind of questions we could answer in the regular Copilot experience, but you could also say find the sales summary report. See what it comes up with. Okay, so there is a report over here. It also found one called store sales that's in a and then of course once it finds that, you can click on it and it'll open it up. This is actually something unrelated, so I'm kind of surprised I found it. So that it gives you some idea of what it can help you with. You can find reports about a topic. It can also, answer questions, prepare summaries. You can ask it to give you a quick overview. This is actually a helpful one. So if you, let's try that one. Actually, give me a quick overview of that. Why? And there's probably, actually, I've got a few copies of that. Yeah. different workspaces. So it's going to ask me again which one I want to use. So I'm going to use the one here in my demo workspace. Whoops, that's not what I wanted to do. I actually just want to say, give me an overview of number 1. So you'll notice as well, you're getting a warning up here, AI generated content may be incorrect. I do not have my tenant set right now to only show the prepped for AI models, which again, I think is going to be a good idea or a best practice as you move forward, especially in a larger Power BI environment. Just to limit its scope and give it focus on the ones that are have gone through this process that I'm going to show you in a minute. So anyway, this is in this case we just asked for an overview. It gave a quick summary. So anyway, there's lots of other things you can do with Copilot. I don't my intention here is not to go through really kind of how to use Copilot, really more about how we're going to get data ready and kind of tweak and tune it within the environment. But I wanted to kind of start out with kind of level setting in terms of how we interact with it. So these are the two primary, I would say, data analyst kind of experiences for Copilot in Power BI or Fabric. I say data analyst because there's other things with Copilot you can when you're in the kind of more of the developer or the report creation interface, you can get Power BI, or you can get Copilot to generate reports for you. It's really good. In fact, it's completely ruined my DAX skills in Power BI because I don't write DAX at all anymore. I just ask it to do something for me and it figures all that out. But that's one of my favorite use cases for Copilot in kind of that developer mode. So there's, and I'm sure as you guys are aware, Microsoft's put a Copilot in just about everything that every product they have now. So, but we're really focused on for today, you kind of just these what I'm calling more the analyst experience in terms of being able to interact with and really ask questions of your data. Any other quick questions about the standalone experience before we jump into kind of how we prep these models for AI?
This comes automatically with Fabric and Power BI.
Again, if you have a Fabric capacity, those two buttons will light up, and you should have access to it. That's correct. Well, yeah. So yeah, we'll get into the requirements that you absolutely can disable who has access to it and et cetera. Yeah, there are some limits there. But yes, I didn't do any. We're going to get into the prepping the models for AI here in a moment, just so we can get better answers out of our data. But I haven't done it. In fact, I've done very little in my demo environment here to prep anything. So.
Python language or we just introduced the Copilot in it. So using that Microsoft 365 can have enabled Copilot and the Python use of it. The Excel and Power BI. I don't know about the Excel was right.
Yeah, we'll talk about how we can use Python, in fact, a little later to interact with some of the stuff as well.
Yeah, you just give the summary of the data. So we just provided a sample data using a simple query of it, and but using the Python you can extract from the code and visual something.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point, and that's again more on the developer creation side, but you can absolutely do some pretty advanced things with when you get into the scripting mode. So let me jump back to my my slides real quick. So now we're going to talk about preparing our models for AI, and they're really broken down into. And we'll show this is the interface from the from Fabric here that we're going to look at in a moment. But it's really they've started by focusing on these three key areas: simplify the data schema, verify the answers, or create verified answers, I should say, and add AI instructions. So we'll step through each of those and what that looks like, and where you can find that. Here in a bit. Let's just jump right back in there. So we're going to pull up my semantic model. So I've got this wide world importer semantic model. I'm going to open that up. I believe there's a very similar interface. If there's a prep for AI button that will show up in Power BI desktop now, if you prefer that. They're trying to bring a lot of that experience out to the web. So I'm just going to do it here online. And again, you should see that. I think you'll see this even in a workspace that's not assigned to a capacity right now. Although I don't quote me on that. But if we click this prep for AI button, you're going to see that those same three things I just mentioned, and we can just kind of click through them one by one here. So for starters, simplify the data schema. You're going to have, in your Power BI model, your Power BI semantic model, you're going to have obviously a series of tables, and within the tables, you've got a whole bunch of columns. This is just a way of limiting the scope of your model when it comes to responding to questions from Copilot. So if you've got, which is often the case, if you've got a larger model that you've brought in, maybe a big table that you probably has more information that you need. I mean, frankly, this is a good habit to get into even when you're building your semantic models. If you've really followed best practice there, you're going to limit the amount of data that's been brought in for reporting purposes. The example I'm showing here, this is like a people table or persons table. We've got things like a fax number in here, phone number, is stuff that might be useful in a system somewhere, but from a reporting standpoint, I don't think anybody's really going to report on fax numbers. So that's probably something that didn't belong in our semantic model to begin with. It probably really doesn't belong when we're asking questions of it for AI. So again, the general rule of thumb, right, is the more that we can focus it on what's really important, the better off we're going to be. So this just gives us an opportunity to remove extraneous data from our selections from exposing it to AI. I think by default, the ones that you'll see that are unchecked, as you notice here, are some of the relationship columns. So I've got a cities that relates to a state table down here, and it's just unselected that state province ID since it's probably already down here. In fact, we could probably further remove it from that table because the ID values don't mean a whole lot to us. So a little bit of maintenance here at this level can go a long way to streamlining this. Now, I guess while we're here, we should probably talk as well about this is just best practice in terms of semantic model design. But I think it's easy in Power BI to treat the reports that we build in Power BI as kind of the primary data product in our environments, and not focus as much on the model itself, especially if you're in an environment that doesn't do a lot of self-service. You'll see models like this one, and this one was kind of pulled from a sample SQL database, and I really just kind of pulled full tables in here from 5 or 6 different tables. So, and this is pretty common as well as you build semantic models. You kind of suck in large tables, and then you kind of use what you want, and you leave a lot of extra stuff out there. You don't spend a lot of time cleaning up the names, give things friendly names that make a lot of sense. The kind of things that you would really do if you're really interested in focused on a self-service semantic model that you could roll out to a less technical audience, I'll say, that may not be very familiar with your underlying data model. This has been best practice in Power BI for some time, but it's one that my guess is that a lot of organizations don't do a very good job of following. So even before you get to this point, if you could take time to go in there, and we'll jump over and show a little bit, a few examples of what I'm talking about even, but just to clean up the naming conventions, hide or remove columns that aren't necessary within your model, and really focus on building a model that you would feel comfortable in kind of handing to, if we're building a model for our HR team, building a model that you'd be comfortable handing to a fairly junior analyst within the HR, and maybe not even an analyst, just someone that understands HR enough that they could find the the various attributes and measures that they would need to kind of drag and drop onto something like a Power BI canvas. If you start there and give it that will help quite a bit. Now, probably step back. One of the ways they encourage you to treat these AI agents are as if they were kind of a new hire, maybe like a recent college grad, someone that understands data well, but doesn't understand your data. And so you can think of part of what we're doing here as just a way to kind of onboard our agent to make sure that they understand our data and our model. And the more help we can give them by again, giving these things friendly names, scoping it down so there's not as much data, the better the model is going to, or this agent, if you want to think of it in those terms, is going to understand the data. So that's this first step, simplify the data schema. Let's just select what's important. So I think I made one little change. We'll just apply that. And then I'll jump over to the second one, which was verified answers. Now, we don't actually create I'll show you how we actually create them here. This just shows a few that I've already created. In fact, so let's go back. Let's show how we start with those. Because to create a verified answer, what you really do is you create one from a visual that you already have. So what a verified answer is giving the agent some hints or really even instructions on, if someone asks this question or a question very similar to this is how I want you to answer it. And when I say this is how I want you to show this visual. So we're going to go back to one of the reports that we have associated with this data after it applies my changes. All right, I'm going to jump back to this report we looked at earlier. You do need to be in the edit mode of a report. So I'm going to jump over there. And what you can do is you can say a little more options there. You'll see a setup a verified answer. You should see that on more or less all of the visuals that you have on the page. And so you can tell it, I want this to be the verified answer if someone asks about the sales by salesperson, which is what this breakdown is. So it gives you a few suggestions on which questions it thinks this answers. So you can, which person generated the most, and is that, oh, this is profit, not sales by, this is profit by salesperson. So yeah, if someone asks which person generated the most profit, show profit by salesperson. So you can give it a couple. I think there's some limit in terms of how many suggested questions, but you give it some suggestions here on the what you want it to respond with, or what you want it to respond to rather, and it should respond when it gets a question like that. It should respond with this visual specifically. So I'm actually going to copy this one out. Let's just do that. And we'll test it here in a moment. But after you create that, and again, you can add a few more different phrases that you want to apply, and then save it or apply it rather. And then you can see I've got a couple other here that I created ahead of time. And of course, you can go back in and edit those and change them around if you want, or get rid of them. But anyway, so if you've got common questions, everyone wants to see, show me I think I've got one here on the top 10 customers by sales or something like that. If that's a question that you get frequently, or that users are asking a lot, and you want to kind of have a little bit more control over the output or the response from the agent, this is a way to do that. Not only that, it helps the agent better understand your information. The more of these you give it, gives it more context to understand the kind of questions they're going to be asked and the kind of results that you're expecting it to give. So another way of training our data. I'm sorry, I've been kind of skipping. Any questions about either the simplified data scheme, or simplify the data schema, or the verified answers? All right. The model itself isn't changing. The question was, is it override the model? It will override kind of the base response that the agent will give. If I would have asked who were the top 10 customers by sales before I'd created this verified answer. That's a good question. So simplifying the schema here, removing that does not actually change the model itself. The model is still going to contain those fields. All this step does is it tells AI, I don't want you to look at, if I were to deselect the entire cities table, correct. Yeah, the model itself stays in place. But the AI just doesn't have visibility in anything you unselect here. Okay, and then the third one would be AI instructions, and this is where almost kind of a notebook, and you can just tell it things about your data that it may not natively understand, and just give it instructions. If anyone's ever trained an agent or given instructions in more kind of an advanced instruction mode for something like Copilot or ChatGPT, where you can be very specific about what you want it to do and how you want it to respond. This is similar in that way. So I've given it a few hints where in my table here I've got kind of a standard invoice header and detail. And so when I'm asking questions about sales, what sales really is and the measure in this case is just called invoice amount. But I'm telling it, if somebody asks about sales, what they're really talking about is invoice amount. There are a couple of ways to do that in Power BI. There's the way that we traditionally did this before some of the Prep for AI interface was exposed. Was they have synonyms in Power BI. If anyone's ever played with those are still there and they can still be helpful. We'll talk about those in a minute. But that on any given field in your model, whether it's a measure or an attribute, you can give it some other names that it may go by, and that's also information that can be helpful for Copilot when it's trying to just understand your data better. But in this case, I've just given it here as an AI instruction. I've also told it here, so maybe I can show you an example of this would make more sense. But so in this data set, I've got two really large customers here that are called head office. I'm treating those as a bit of an outlier. So what I've told, I gotta get back to that other interface. What I've told it to do here is anytime someone asks to break down by customer, to just ignore the customers that have that head office in the name. And in fact, I think in some of the earlier examples, the queries that I was running against it, you saw that even noted. It said something about here are the customers, excluding those that had head office in the name. So you can get very precise, very pedantic in some of your instructions and responses here. This is also kind of free form. There's no programming language to understand here. This is just instructions in natural language given to the model, and you can layer as many of these on. Well, maybe not as many. It looks like you get 10,000 characters to layer instructions in, but these are just some very simple examples. So those are kind of the three big pillars here. We're gonna simplify the schema and narrow it down the scope as much as we can. We're going to give it some verified answers where appropriate to both help drive the expected response and a consistent response. That's probably the other thing that we should have highlighted with verified answers. That one of the things that I'm sure you guys have all run into with all of these large language models is that you can ask it the same question and sometimes it'll give you a different response. Now, hopefully, that's not different in the sense that the sales value that it came back with is a different number, although that's always a possibility. But if you're just wanting to give people a consistent layout, right? Where this is all when you ask about sales by year, this is what it's going to look like every time. That's one of the other benefits of that verified answer approach, as well as again just additional training data for the agent to understand your schema. And then again, the AI instructions are just kind of a wild card. It's open season. You can type in here any kind of instructions that you want to give it, both in terms of kind of how to understand your data, or maybe how you want the responses to be presented to users as well. Question. This is all, yes. Correct. Yeah. What we're doing right now is in the context of a specific semantic model. So again, if you've got a large environment, you're going to have to do this process many times. And I say have to, you don't have to prep these models for AI. And some of the ones that we were querying earlier are the kind of the unprepped models. And depending on how well you've done some of the work in the model itself and how easily the agent can understand that your base model, the better the results. But the more information, the better, right? Yeah. Well, yeah, yeah. It tells it exactly how you want it to respond is the notion there. So it could just be again that one time you ask that question and it gives you a little paragraph summary, and the next time you ask it, it gives you a breakdown as a table. The verified answer will just say when that question is asked. And in fact, we'll look at it here in a second because I want to test some of these things out, and you can kind of see, I think, as we do it, how it answered the question. Yes.
Feedback. Few users are asking similar FAQs. It's gonna tell you, hey, as a developer, I see these 3 questions are frequently asked. You want to add instructions?
Yeah, he was asking about is there a way to see what questions are being frequently asked? I think there is some diagnostic data you can get out of the Copilot interface that see what kind of questions. I haven't dug into that myself, but I think not only that, but I think actually it may be an interesting question to ask the model itself. Because it keeps track of that kind of stuff, and it starts to learn what those questions are like. And if you spend some time with it and you ask some questions and say, no, that's not what I wanted, and when I talked about when the order was placed, so what I really wanted you to look at was the order date and not the invoice date or something like that, it understands that and keeps track of that as well. So it learns not only from the developer and some of this interface, but it learns just based on feedback it gets from users themselves. Yeah. Question somewhere else? Nope. Okay. So yeah, so I want to try a few more of these out to kind of see what this look like. And let's just jump back into Copilot. I'm going to give it that model that we've looked at, and then we're going to ask it. SW. Who was the top customer for, let's say, March 2015? Now, I did go ahead and give it context here. If I hadn't done that, it would probably ask me what model that I want to use. But it's going to go, and this is an interesting one because I'm not sure it's going to understand what the context top customer means. We'll see if it's smart enough to figure that out and what it comes back with, whether that's by sales or by profit. And again, that's something that we could give it some additional context, either in that AI instructions mode where we could tell it when someone asks about top customers, I want you to give them the top customers according to total sales or total profit. And so this is the warning you get when it's not prepped, right? It figured this out, but before it gives you the answer, it's going to say, hey, this came from a model that's not prepped for AI use. Look at it carefully because I might have just made this up. And we'll show you how that we can change that here in a moment. In fact, it even tells us this answer required more analysis than usual. I'm not sure why. Maybe it was the fact that we were a little generic with top, but it gave us the top customer by sales for March of 2015. And you can even see information. So here's how Copilot arrived at this. The query looked at sales data and focused on finding the single customer with the highest total sales for that month. It specifically leaves out any customers whose names include head office. So those are not considered in the results. The sales amount shown is the total for each customer during March 2015, and only the customer with the highest sales is displayed. So you get the background, you get to understand not only see the answer, but you get to understand kind of the process that the agent went through to solve the problem. And if any of that looks wrong, then you can get in and give it some additional instructions. Say, no, what I actually wanted was by profit instead of by sales, for example. You can not only that, you can see, of course, it shows you the semantic model it used to solve the problem. If you really want to get into it and want to see the DAX query that it ran to get this, it'll even show you that as well, because that's what's happening behind the scenes. So again, you can get a lot of information about kind of its not only kind of what the result came back with, but the thought process involved as well. Let's see if I can get it to pull back one of our verified answers. And I'm trying to remember what they were now. I think I might have had one here. No, that's not one of the questions I asked it. Let me go back and double check. So let's see if we can get that question answered. Who are the top 10 customers by sales? And actually, you know what, let's do, I'm going to change my mind. So I created one earlier for that little bar chart we had. I said, if how do sales amounts change by month? So we're going to jump back to Copilot. I'm going to give it that context again, just to shortcut the first question it's going to ask me. Now, I'm giving it the exact same question. It should be smart enough to know that if I've given it some kind of small derivation of that question or something similar, to also respond with the same result. And I guess we could potentially test that here as well. Yeah.
Generating DAX query, is it strictly using the Vertipack engine behind the scene of the Power BI? Or is it also giving a boost with its own, I don't know, whatever.
Well, I mean, you can see what it does, right? It tries to understand the I'm sorry, the question was, is it strictly using the Vertipack engine from Power BI, or is it adding some of its own AI secret sauce, right? The AI part of it is just understanding the query. It's translating the question that you're asking in natural language to a DAX query. You know, we saw it generate the DAX query there a moment ago. So that's where the AI part of it comes in. So in some ways, you can think of it as a translator, right? Translates from natural language to a DAX query for you, kind of on its own. Now this one didn't work for us. We asked that question and it didn't actually respond with the verified answer that we wanted to get. So maybe we found a bug, or maybe where it's just not cooperating with me because it's a demo, right? That usually happens. But I'm realizing I'm taking a little more time on this part than I wanted, so I want to go ahead and move ahead to a couple other things. Any other quick questions about those kind of three core prep for AI for your models? Okay, then I want to talk about just a couple other things that are associated with the same approach. We already talked about using friendly descriptive names. It's just more maintenance of your base model itself. Any work you can do there is going to make some of the other work that the Copilot has to do simpler. You can also provide descriptions for your fields, and specifically, Copilot is able to generate descriptions for you for your measures, particularly. So let's take a look at what that looks like here real quick. Within the model, so I'm going to go into, I'm going to open our semantic model, go into edit mode. You can do here in the browser now. And if we find, so as you select fields, there's a description box in each one. So certainly any additional information, or Copilot rather, is aware of these description fields. So if you can give it more information about what a field is, that is helpful for it. Now, for just attributes or metrics that appear in your model, Copilot is not currently able to give you a description or generate a description for those, but what it can create for you right now are descriptions for measures. So you've built a DAX measure, sometimes some pretty complex DAX measures that are doing all kinds of things. There's a create with Copilot button that shows up for the measures in your model. And it just takes a look at the DAX and says, all right, here's what we think it does. It calculates the total invoice by summing the extended price field from the sales invoice line table. So I don't, so we're going to do that. We're going to stick that in there. I think there's a way to do this in bulk. Maybe the only way to do it in bulk is to use some of the scripting models, but you certainly can come through maybe some of the more popular measures in your model and have Copilot even help you by creating those things. And again, you can tweak and tune that to get a better description that better describes your measure if necessary. So that's another way you can quickly give it some additional context. And then finally, marking your model as prep for AI. So we've seen the warnings about what it looks like when your model is not prepped for AI. In order to actually prep your model for AI, let's go back to the semantic model. Yes, I'm sorry.
Put in relevant information in the tags and the description. It'll reduce the amount of AI instructions that you have to put in.
That would, yeah, that would make sense. The more, and I think that's true overall. So the question was that the more that we put into the comments and I'm sorry, in the description fields and at the model level, the less that we have to provide in terms of AI instructions in prepping the model. And yes, I agree with that. The more work you can do, it's even the old axiom with the on ETL, right? To do the work as far upstream as you can. So yeah, if you can give it friendly names, you can give it nice informative descriptions that should help the model understand that data better and lessen the amount of maybe some of those AI instructions that you need to provide it. So to actually mark one for as prep for AI, you'll just go into the settings of your semantic model. And one of the options down here is an AI preparation. And then we just flag it as AI. So what you'll notice here is there are no guardrails. Anybody could flag any old semantic model as prep for AI. There's no check that's going to happen and say, hey, you actually didn't prep this model for AI. What are you talking about? It's going to go ahead and let you say, yep, fire away. You can put some guardrails up around this in the sense that it's in the tenant settings you can control who is able to flag models as prep for AI. So if you want to have some kind of review process, this is particularly useful if you're going to enable the setting for a standalone Copilot only to use prep for AI models. If you want to have some control over which models are actually prepped and what steps, to verify that someone's actually gone through and done some of the things that we've just gone through, that would be useful. But again, all this is in here is a flag. Anybody, well, depending on permissions, anyone can check, and there's no check that anything has actually been done to prep it. But that's all that needs to happen to actually flag the model as prep for AI. And then what you should see is you shouldn't see that. We ask it again. What? We should no longer see the warning that it gave us last time that said, hey, this model hasn't been prepped. You're going to get some strange results. It should just come back and answer the question. And the last point on my slide that I had up there a moment ago was just about testing it, and that's kind of what we've been doing here. So we make changes to the instructions. We do go through all those 3 steps. We do a few of the other things we're talking about, and this you can test this either in this generic standalone Copilot, as I'm doing here, and I'm pointing it specifically to our model. And there, yeah, you see the answer without the warning. Or it may be a little simpler actually to do this in what they call the classic report-based Copilot experience, just because you don't have to give it the context here, since we're really just focused on this one model as we're playing with it. So that's kind of the iterative process, right? We go through the prep for AI steps. We give it some information there, then we start asking it questions. If we find some results that we don't expect, or coming back in a way that we don't want them to come back, then we jump back over there and we give it some more AI instructions, or we create a new verified answer, or filter the data down a little further. And so back and forth until you get a model that's answering questions the way you want, at least as best it can. All right, any quick questions about that? Because I want to jump into Fabric data agents here for the last half hour or so. All right. Oh shoot, I forgot we had this conversation to still have. Requirements and consumption. So there are various tenant settings. There's about 5 or 6 or 7 different tenant settings for Power BI that have to do with Copilot. You kind of see most of them over here, I think. So there's some have to do with whether or not you can send data to OpenAI servers outside of your geographic region. That's probably not a big deal for anyone here in the U.S. because I think those servers are pretty much U.S. bound. But if you had geographic constraints, but more anything about who can use it and what features and things like that. So you have kind of the standard ability in Power BI to give it to everyone in the organization, no one in the organization, or filter it down to just specific people or groups. But what does it take to actually enable this? As I mentioned, you do need to have a Fabric capacity. I said a Power BI premium capacity, but I think those are all but phased out now, and everything's switched over to Fabric. The relatively new change there is that when a lot of these features were first rolling out, Microsoft put them behind an F64 higher, one of the larger SKUs that you had to have. They've pushed all this stuff all the way down to the lowest level for Fabric. So all you need is a F2, which is only a few $100s a month, to start enabling these kind of experiences. That Copilot button should show up. Again, the caveat being that the models that we're referencing here, is we showed the wide world importers one that we were playing with. It needs to be in a workspace that's assigned to the capacity. You can have a capacity, but not all your workspaces are assigned to it. And if that's the case, you won't be able to use Copilot with the models that are in a non-capacity workspace. So then the question becomes, how does it really work? And so as you ask questions of Copilot, it converts your questions into tokens for OpenAI, kind of the backend model. That gets a lot more complicated than we need to get into, and I don't fully understand it myself. But essentially, the more you ask Copilot to do, the more tokens it's going to have to generate, and the harder that query is to answer, and the more consumption it's going to consume. When you purchase a Fabric Power BI, or a Fabric capacity rather, you get a certain amount of capacity depending on your SKU level. And once that capacity has been hit, then you start getting warnings and error messages about, hey, you've run out of something. I can't do this right now, and it starts to limit your capacity. So that's the way it kind of consumes that. I think, of course, there are usage reports where you can see who's using it the most and how much is being consumed by Copilot. I think there are even some governors in place now in Fabric that allow you to reserve a certain amount of your consumption for certain workloads, or that may be a preview thing. I'm not sure. There's also the ability now to have what they call a dedicated Copilot capacity. So if you want to just funnel all of your Copilot workload to a specific capacity, so you've got maybe a big F64 to do a lot of your production stuff, and it's doing a lot of Lakehouse and ETL stuff that's fairly heavy usage. And then Copilot, of course, by design is very unpredictable, right? You could somebody really go to town on Copilot for one day and use up your entire capacity. So you can spin that off and say basically everything Copilot is going to go against this capacity. And then the worst thing that would happen is if, at the end of the day, someone's fires it up to ask questions that, basically you've used up all of your credits for today, and you're going to have to wait and ask that question tomorrow. It wouldn't kill a nightly load for your Lakehouse because someone used up all your capacity. So there is the ability to do that now. That's another tenant thing. But generally speaking, the more complex, the larger your prompts, the bigger the data set it's going to have to go and understand, or the more complex the query is, that kind of stuff, the more consumption you're going to consume. So that's my 30,000-foot view of licensing requirements. Any questions about what that looks like? They thankfully have simplified this quite a bit over the last 12 months or so. All right, well then now let's jump over to the Fabric data agents, because this is I think where things start to get really interesting. So a Fabric data agent is very similar to what we've already talked about in a lot of ways, as we'll see here in a moment. But what they really enable is they break this kind of an interface free from the Power BI or the Fabric portal, and allow you to bring it other places and do other things with it. So we'll talk about different places to consume it later. But I think I think I maybe even mentioned in kind of the synopsis of the presentation was in some kind of a chatbot, or you can embed it into Teams, things like that. But this gives you a much more customizable approach to the way that some of the AI experiences is set up. So like the experience that we had there in just Fabric Copilot, it's meant to be a very conversational, large language model driven experience. But in addition to having access to, well, of course, the Copilot was focused on a specific semantic model. These can be focused on multiple semantic models for one. So you can kind of combine. If you think back to Power BI, or Power BI, the relationship between a Power BI semantic model and report can only be tied to a single semantic model. That's kind of the way to think of Copilot. Copilot had to be tied to a specific semantic model to ask a question. Now, again, we've got the standalone that can help you choose which one, but you're still, by the time it answers questions, you've got to point to a specific semantic model. This is a different paradigm here, because we can point it to, if we've got an HR model and a sales model and a finance model or something like that, you can point this data agent to a number of different models, and then try to tell it to how to understand and maybe cross query, if you will. But in addition to that, it works across the other major Fabric data stores, so things like lakehouses and warehouses. And I don't know if anyone's started to use KQL databases. That's kind of your real-time streaming data. If you've got any of that, it's able to understand and work with all those. Now, the caveat there is that you do have to limit it to just 5 data sources, so you can't point it to some massive amount. But it can be 5 in any combination of these 3 things. So maybe a traditional model would be you've got a semantic model, and it kind of has a lot of your maybe summary sales data that you do some reporting on. But if you wanted to really get back into the nitty-gritty transactional detail to do, God knows what, but you could combine that with maybe your lakehouse data that sits at a much more granular level, and have it understand both of those and be able to answer questions not only from one of the two, but maybe even across the two. So we'll show you what that looks like here in a moment. And so it gives you the ability to guarantee the guaranteed context is based on the data sources that we've defined. The accuracy, not necessarily guaranteed. I probably should say guaranteed context and better accuracy, because it's still an AI process. But the increased accuracy comes from being able to, again, control where it's going to look for answers. So if you think about our standalone Copilot experience, I've asked it what were sales for 2015. Absent some additional instruction, it's got a big giant data state to go and try to figure out where I'm going to answer that question. If I ask that same question of this data agent that we're going to put together, I can already tell it, hey, when somebody asks what their sales were, I want you to go and look at this data source, right? So maybe it's this semantic model, or if someone asks about the invoice details, I want you to go back to the lakehouse and search, using SQL, by the way, and search and find the details, if you will. And so then we can integrate this back into Copilot. It becomes, in fact, you can kind of see if we jump back to the standalone Copilot experience. One of the things that you can, I've been selecting the semantic model, but one of the things you can select here is a is a data agent if you want that data agent to answer your question. So it can plug in and answer questions there in Copilot as well. And then again, you can expand it and go other places with it, as we'll show you as well. So in terms of what's different between this and Copilot, that's really the big difference is I have access to other data sources other than semantic models, and I can use multiple data sources to answer these questions as opposed to being focused on a specific semantic model. Now, certainly it's helpful to have gone through that process if you're going to point this data agent to a semantic model, to have already gone through that process to prep it for AI, because the same caveats apply there. The more work you put in, the better it's going to understand that data. Having gone through those steps, it's going to help this quite a bit. So how does this really work? I thought this is a pretty good visual breakdown, if you will. So just like in the Copilot mode, you ask it a question, it's going to try to understand it. It's going to do its best to try to figure out what you've asked it. And then it's going to identify what source I need to use. So you've asked it for sales data, so it knows it needs to use this specific semantic model. Now, it may be able to figure that out on its own, or you may have to provide some instructions to it, as we'll show you in a minute. And then it generates the query. And again, this can be, this is where it becomes quite a bit more powerful. The Copilot mode only wrote DAX queries to interrogate our semantic models. This can write SQL queries if we've got data in a warehouse in Fabric. It can write KQL queries if you've got those streaming data sets. Of course, you can also write DAX to hit the semantic models, et cetera. So it understands a number of these languages and can kind of pick and choose and figure out the right one. And then, of course, it executes the query and response. And these can be multi-step kind of things, as I hope to have time to show you here in a second, where you ask it kind of a complex question that needs to go get information out of more than one data set. And so it runs a query, maybe a DAX query, and then also a SQL query, and then it's smart enough to kind of combine the two and give you a concise answer. So that's really the power of a data agent. Now, a data agent in Copilot, in Fabric, looks like this. Again, assuming that you're in a Fabric-enabled workspace, you can create one. Just I don't remember where it's at, but it's if you search for agent in here, you can create these data agents. They are still technically in preview. I'm not sure they're going to stay there much longer. And instead of creating a new one here, I'm going to jump to one that I've already created so I can speed things through this a little bit. But when you create them, you get you can add data sources. So I've added that same semantic model that we were looking at previously, that wide world importers. You also have the ability to kind of come in like in the Copilot experience, where you can select what you want it to focus on. In here, you can't get all the way down to the column level, so you're just selecting which tables you want it to. Which tables you want it to focus on. So you could remove tables that you don't care about, that it shouldn't care about. And then you can add additional data sources. That's what it looks like. You get access to your Fabric tenant, and you can go find the various semantic models or lakehouses, et cetera, that you want to point it to. In my example here, what I've done is I pulled in the kind of generic sales data. I have salesperson data up here in this people table, and I wanted to show how we could pull in some data around quotas. So there's no quota data in this main data set. I wanted to show how we could potentially have another system that had the quotas by salesperson and use the two independently to answer questions. So you get once you've selected your data sources and added those, and then again selected which tables you care about, you can go about giving the model instructions. Now, this is a little more involved, maybe a little more rudimentary than the not rudimentary, a little more advanced, I should say, than the version of the AI instructions that we gave it within a semantic model. This is actually kind of an outline of kind of their suggested instructions to give it. And I haven't done much to customize this one, but I've got a few things down here we'll show you. But this is just markdown text. So you click on that, you can kind of type in whatever you want here. These are just instructions that you're providing. So this is instructions at the at the agent level, the top level, if you will. So you can give it, here's what the objective of this agent is, and here are the different data sources it has access to. This is really just an example. Here you see one. It says use this specific lake house for product and transaction data. Use this one for customer demographics. Again, I just set this up quickly the other day, and so I haven't gone through and given it as much information as I probably should or certainly can. And you see a couple of different types of information that it feels like are typically helpful in order to give the agent instructions. You can also give it specific instructions on your non-semantic model data sources. So it assumes that with a semantic model that you've already given whatever instructions you need at that semantic model level. So the things that we told it, like ignoring the head office customers and things like that, that should all be kind of inherited here. So again, it already assumes that you've given those kind of instructions at that level, but you can give it instructions specific to your SQL or your case KQL data sources. So here I have some instructions specific to this quotas table that I brought in. I kind of given it some information about what's contained here. This is just a 3-column table that has a quota and a quota month. And I've given it some hints about, when you're asked about quotas, always return the full name of the salesperson found in the application people table, not the salesperson ID. So this is where that kind of the cross querying has to come in. So because if I ask it for a quota, all that's in the quotas table is an ID value. So it's got to figure out what those quotas are and then kind of merge that up with the name of the salesperson that's found in the other data set altogether. Probably not best practice. If you really had quota data, you probably maybe pull it back into that model itself or put it into some other kind of model, but it serves our purpose here for today. So you can give it as much instructions. You see kind of when asked about questions. So I say when asked about quotas, always return the full name. When asked about a salesperson, always return the full name. When asked about performance versus quota, compare the quota amount to the invoice amount in the wide world importers data. So I kind of played with this a little bit. I had some varying results. Let's just try it. So let's say who had the highest quota for 2015. Again, results may vary. It may come back with just a salesperson ID for this. Oh, no, it was smart enough to do that. So you can kind of even see what it came up with. So Kayla had the highest individual monthly quota with a quota of, however, if you're referring to the highest annual quota, blah, blah, blah. And it was smart enough again and I thought that you usually shows me the steps complete. I'm thinking I may have already asked it this question, which is why I didn't have to show the steps again. But what you would see is that it's smart enough to say, okay, I know that to get quote information, I'm going to have to go get it from this SQL Lakehouse, or I'm sorry, Fabric Lakehouse. And then to translate that to the person's name, I'm going to have to go run a query against the people table in the wide world importers. So again, it's smart enough to understand where to go to get data, and then even to kind of merge it up at the end. Yeah.
So when it gets data back,
Mhm.
like detail level data, are you able to export it and keep it, or what kind of, or even if there's a visual?
You can probably ask to output it as a table, and then you can probably export or copy that out, or yeah. So I mean, you got some options there. I'm sorry. The question again was, is there a way to get the data and export it or capture it? Yeah.
The question,
Mhm.
I guess the data agents, those are available in standalone mode. User wants to use them, they need to go in standalone mode, not just like in co guy. So
That's correct. I don't know if there's a way to interact with it directly. Yeah, no, I think that yeah, Right.
Same thing for backend model.
Yes, it is. And as I pointed out, the question is the instructions we're giving it here are very similar to what we did in the semantic model. And yeah, as I was trying to point out, you don't have the ability to give the semantic model specific additional instructions. I was able to do that on the AI demo. This is the lakehouse I created. That's a SQL. I'm sorry, it's a Fabric Lakehouse, so it doesn't already have the whole prep for AI kind of capability built in. So this is just a way of giving it similar kind of instructions for that data source, but it already assumes or inherits rather the instructions that you gave the other model. Yeah, and then you get the kind of the top level instructions, and this is where you can help it understand kind of which data source to use for different questions, maybe how to combine results from different data sources. That's kind of the top level. So you've got your top level agent instructions, and then instructions for each individual source. The instructions for the semantic models, however, are going to be inherited from the semantic model itself. Yes.
This is more of a wishful thinking question. Since you mentioned the warehouse within Fabric, Azure gives you like Azure SQL database or Power BI, which was part of Power Platform. Can I ask questions about a Power Automate refresh of the data set when that happens? Or is there a Power App that populates the data to this warehouse or stuff like that? Something related to.
So the question is if you can ask it sounds like maybe add questions about or something like a Power Automate flow or even something from Azure SQL.
Yeah.
So no, not quite yet. And well, I should say so for Fabric data agent is restricted to just data that you have in Fabric. Now, the next step here would be able to take that out into something like Copilot Studio or the Azure AI Foundry. And that gets it further upstream in the kind of Copilot ecosystem. A Fabric data agent is still just going to answer questions about data. There's no other, we think about agents can actually perform tasks. There's no task that you can perform. I don't even think that an agent here will do things like refresh a data set. I think it's strictly a kind of a read only, kind of ask them questions, get an answer. If you pull this, once this is published, and I'm probably not gonna have time to actually show this off. Once this is published, you can consume this data agent in Copilot Studio as kind of what they call a kind of an agent or a knowledge source there. And you could combine that with information it might know about, again, maybe something outside of Fabric. You've got a lot of ability to do that there. And then you could create smart agents at that point that would actually perform tasks based on the results. So if you've got a salesperson and they're not meeting quota, send a note to Kayla that she's 50% below quota this month and ask her what happened, or some action that can occur. But that's where the Copilot Studio would. So again, it all builds on one another. You prep your individual semantic models, then you can build data agents in Fabric that consume multiple semantic models and maybe more lakehouses, warehouses, et cetera. And then you can use that to feed into something like a Copilot a studio agent that can not only can kind of consume that agent to answer questions and then perform other actions outside of Fabric altogether. So that's kind of the hierarchy there. Yeah. Yeah.
Relationship.
There was no, there was no data, there's no relationship. He's asking if there's additional work to kind of set up or train, and I think the question was was there an additional or an existing relationship? No, there was no. They both had a salesperson ID, right? So you do have to. I mean, I guess you could tell it if you just had a name value, but just like any kind of a database join, the names are going to be a little less. So it was at least set up so they shared an ID value across these two tables, but there was no native relationship between the two environments. That's what really I think is pretty impressive here, that it's able to kind of understand. And you can see um, some of the guidance I gave it when asked about quotas for a salesperson, get the amount, blah, 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 then get the salesperson name from the people table in the other data set. So it's smart enough, again, to understand, hey, I've got to go here to get this thing, and I've got to go here to get this other piece of information, and then I can combine it and pull it all together. Again, this is a fairly rudimentary example, but it shows you kind of the power of these reasoning models that you can put on top of your data. Yes.
Agent, and if you can hit it from Copilot Studio, then you do get around, I guess, who would have licensing, or how does that kind of work? Because you could make a Copilot Studio chatbot, then you're kind of out of.
Well, so it's going to be, so Copilot Studio, I'm not an expert on licensing by Copilot Studio by any means, but I know that they kind of charge you similarly in terms of how many tokens and consumption kind of thing. The way I understand it is, if you think about the reasoning that will happen within that Copilot agent, let's use our example earlier where we had this data agent that we published, and we had it kind of consumed within the Copilot agent, the Copilot Studio agent. And we may have it would be the first pass. So you would ask it a question, it would translate that and push it over into, so it would probably have some small penalty, or you'd pay some small component there, but the bulk of the consumption would probably be consumed by the Fabric data agent at that point. If you had that, if you got the response and then you did other things within the Copilot Studio agent based on those responses, or again, potentially merged some of the the responses with another data source of some kind in the Copilot Studio agent, then at that point, that reasoning or that logic would be kind of billed to the, so it would be a multi-level, multi-layered billing at that point, is the way I understand it.
So from like in the other ways, Copilot, I had to have a Copilot, I have to have a Power BI license to use the things before. Now,
you wouldn't necessarily, the way I understand it, I mean, if this is in a, let's say it's even in something like an F2 capacity, which is the smallest you can get, typically for me to go out, for a generic end user to go out and view a report in that workspace, they would need a license, because it's not a, I think, yeah, you may be right in terms of getting around it. You may be able to put a semantic model out there, build these Copilot experiences out, and then expose the,
and you're still paying the capacity.
Yeah.
They're still getting paid on it, but it's not.
the question is kind of how
You're on Power BI.
the per user. Yeah, I think you may be able to do that.
The loop clients that are like that, they've got, well, how many people are
Yeah.
Gosh.
Right. The other question, it becomes kind of how you pass security. You can enable this. In fact, again, the default method, and we haven't talked about security, would be to pass the user's credentials. And that way, if you've got your data trimmed in Power BI so that, when certain people can only see certain things, that gets passed all the way back. So when you ask it a question of, what were sales for this month, and if I can only see a certain part, then it should give you the right answer. There may be some complication with that when the licensing, if the person's not. So I'm not sure there, but you may be right. You may be able to do a bit of an end around on some of the licensing until Microsoft catches on, and then they'll figure out how to charge you something some different way. But
Well, it gives me when they talk about the agents talking to each other, like we're saying, you have a multi-step process.
Yeah.
You put these.
yeah. So I kind of ran out of time. I know we're already at 1:30. I was hoping to show up a few more pieces here, but any other questions? Or I'm happy to stick around here for a few more minutes if anyone has questions. Yeah, what other questions? I don't. Microsoft apparently has committed or is trying to commit to only putting things in preview for 6 months or less, and this has already been in preview for a little while. But that's been the guidance that Microsoft for on the Fabric team anyway, is they were saying that we don't want anything to be in preview for more than 6 months. So I know they have a big Fabric conference coming up. I think that the big European one's coming up like next week or sometime real soon. So would not be surprised to see some announcements around some of these preview features at that time. So
What's been the general with client working on, or clients are using Copilot, and Power BI has been, that's pretty good. It's,
Well, again, I think mileage varies considerably based on the kind of work you're doing here. So I don't think that most organizations have done a very good job of structuring their semantic models in a way that's going to make it easy for Power BI. Again, I think that uh, we tend to treat the reports as the kind of core data product. And as long as we can make our reports look nice and understandable for people, we don't really want them to open up that pane over there that shows all these different tables and all these different fields, right? Well, that's what Copilot's doing. It's opening that thing up. And if you haven't spent some time to make some sense and pare it down and do some of the things we talked about, then yeah, I think that the results are going to be pretty iffy. We haven't seen a ton of uptake on this just yet, but I think a lot of the stuff that I mean, this whole experience here to prep this thing for AI is probably less than 6 months old. So I was excited to do this today. I was excited to dive into this for some of my own learning, just because I think there's a tremendous opportunity here. Everyone's got all these Power BI semantic models, but it's kind of in a lot of cases swamped organizations. There's so much out there. They haven't done a very good job from a governance perspective. This doesn't solve that problem. It makes some of that easier to maybe find and deal with. But I think there's a lot of opportunity here to turn these data sets that we've built into something that really can be, I mean, just dead simple, dummy proof, kind of ask a question, get an answer kind of thing. So
there's a lot of questions we get clients on it. I'm eager to see it's really production ready. Because then you get the sales manager where, well, I just took an Excel and uploaded ChatGPT and I can ask all kinds of stuff. Why can't you guys do this with Power BI?
Yeah.
Right.
right.
You know,
Yeah.
like I said, it's only been a little while for prepping.
Well, yeah, and I think
And it's getting better. I also feel like Microsoft has spread really thin on the Copilot initiative. And how much, you know, of the 100 Copilots, how much does Power BI get or whatever?
yeah, and it's hard to keep track. I mean, just an example we laid out before, all the different layers of these copilots and layer and agents talking to agents, and yeah, it's a lot to keep track of. But all right, anything else before we wrap up? All right, well, thanks everyone.